us serve the community in so many different ways, otherwise I'm sure it's not possible. I just want to take a moment to introduce some of my members of this year board. I'll start off with myself and the Rajendra Kumar, he's the undergraduate co-president, myself representing the graduate community. Then we have the entire web, which is the vice president, Raghav Goel, Rai Cheria, he's currently in New York on his internship. We have a publicity director, the arts director, the web director, the social director, Fari, and finances. And we can never forget our advisors, Somik Raha, Siddhartha, Ankur Gupta, and Deepa, and that's here. Ankur Gupta. So I'll just start off by what has happened this year. To give you a report on our activities, which will give you an idea of what we stand for. It will also hopefully spark ideas from you about what we might do in the coming year. So this was one of our first events, which started off the year by hosting Anuradha Chaudhary, a research associate from the Indian Psychological Institute, to give 2 talks titled The Importance of Sanskrit and Vedic Psychology. We were surprised by the number of calls we received across the country asking us to record this event, which we did. And you can see the videos on our website, hindu.stanford.edu, by going to the past events link. The talk on Vedic psychology was in the form of a panel discussion with postdoctoral scholars from the Department of Psychology, Emma Spella and Philip Golden. I'm sorry if I pronounced the names wrong. Interacting with Anuradha. We believe an understanding of religion and spirituality can only be enhanced by interaction with academia, and you will find this approach to be a recurrent theme in our subsequent events. Anuradha left behind DVDs and some CDs on Sanskrit, which the HSC has purchased, and if anyone is interested, you can contact any of the members here, our web director. Since 2005, we have taken a leadership role in organizing Gandhi Jayanti during Mahatma Gandhi's birthday. This year, instead of a single-day celebration, we helped organize a week-long celebration of Gandhi Jayanti in collaboration with the Office for Religious Life, Stanford Hillel, the Jewish Students Organization, the Stanford University Baha'i Association, and the Stanford India Association, which is popularly now known as SIA. During our event, Dhwani gave a musical performance that was much appreciated. We also screened a film called Scavenging Freedom, made by Somik Raha on the left corner, that focuses on Sulabh Shauchalya, a Gandhian movement in India aimed at removing manual scavenging and open defecation. We believe that there couldn't be a better time for bringing Gandhian idols to our campus, and we're looking for ideas for Gandhi Jayanti this year. So please contact any of the members if you're interested or if you have any suggestions. In November, we organized a unique event titled The Science of Astrology with a famous astrologer from India, Bharat Padmadeo, Professor Ron Howard from the Department of Management Science and Engineering, and Paul Hamilton, a psychology postdoctoral scholar, were on the panel. The session generated great questions and many students obtained readings from Mr. Padmadeo. The objective of this event was to take a scientific look at astrology and to allow open questioning of the principles. And it was quite an interactive session, and we hope to organize a similar next year. The first event of the winter quarter after the new organization took over was the Saraswati Puja, which was where we venerated goddess Saraswati. Prabha Durneja, popularly known as Prabha Aunty, conducted the ceremony in a unique, inclusive manner by involving all students. Surprisingly, it was a pretty good show. We didn't expect more than 10 people, and around like 50 people came in a hall of all sources of knowledge. Saraswati Puja is an occasion for us to realize the central role that knowledge plays in our lives, no matter what we do, and that our aim must be to seek the truth wherever it is to be found. In February, we had a talk on Vedic mathematics by Dr. Vijay Asher. He's, I think, Professor Emeritus from the University of Michigan, and he's been an advisor with IBM for like 10-15 years. And that was quite interesting as well. And on campus and off campus people, we had families bring their children, and this session unexpectedly went for like 3 to 4 hours, and there's still people want it to happen again, so we are trying to probably organize it every quarter from now on. In March, we conducted Holi Puja, which involved holy festivities in Manzanita Field, which is just across the road from here, and a prayer service in our puja room. Holi is a special occasion when we put on colors on our faces to signify that it does not matter what colors we are born with. The same reality that some people call God and others call Atman, Brahman, Self, pervades all of us. We started off the spring quarter by organizing a much anticipated event, the retreat to Olema, offered to us by the Vedanta Society in San Francisco. This time we had 25 participants, 12 men and 13 women, which is a record because we haven't had many people coming for this retreat, not more than like 16, 17 people. And there's kind of a limit which we need to satisfy to get the whole house. And participants hiked, meditated, did karma yoga and improv theater, and delved deep into spirituality in a natural and beautiful environment. We ended spring quarter with an event that is dear to our hearts, unity in diversity. Swami Vivekananda, the monk who brought Hinduism to the West, thundered at the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago that Hindus had no right to claim that truth exists only in the Vedas. Indeed, he spoke out against fundamentalism of any sort and urged all religions to work together to recognize and respect each other. All major religions have beautiful ideas that express some of the highest thoughts mankind has come up with. Yet, when taken in a limited sense, they give rise to fundamentalism. Such fundamentalism has to be tackled openly, and we've taken an active role in this regard since last year by organizing Vivekananda Jayanti as a multi-faith event focusing on uniting all faiths in an atmosphere of friendship and trust. Last year's event was received extremely well, and this year we went a step forward to put out the bold question: how do we tolerate religious intolerance? We had a record turnout of around 100 people, which told us that such topics are relevant and important to the Stanford community. We had participants from the Baha'i, Buddhist, Islamic, Christian and Hindu traditions. Reverend Scotty McLennan, Dean of Religious Life at Stanford, led the panel discussion. The photograph shows the panel. I'm sorry. And Swami Vedananda from the Vedanta Society gave the concluding address of what's the takeaway from this session. We also had an inspiring talk by community member Ajay Kshatriya on the life of Swami Vivekananda and outstanding musical performances by Dhwani and Shivoham, two musical groups on campus. We are not limited to events alone. The HSC provides two valuable sources for learning about Hinduism. The first is the Vedanta study group, held every Sunday at the GCC. We've had both graduates and undergraduates, Hindus and non-Hindus, taking these classes and appreciating the way it is conducted. It's a great way to just spend an hour on the weekend, and Swami Vedananda drives all the way from San Francisco and comes in the afternoon, and it's a great way to relax, and I'm sure if people who are regularly attending can provide you more about the classes here. The Satsang has been a flagship event for the HSC since its inception in January 2006. Its intent was to reinvent, that's the second weekly event that we have. Its intent was to reinvent Stanford University's Hindu Student Council, previously hosting many high-profile events that were dotted unpredictably throughout the academic calendar. It is held on a weekly basis and gives Hindu students the opportunity to congregate and learn in the classic Stanford fashion as a group. As a group, we chant devotional prayers pleading for health, invigorating studies and altruism. We meditate to connect with our spiritual self. We read classical mythological Hindu texts such as the Ramayana. We perform arati to give thanks to God. Finally, we use this as a forum to educate each other about the Hindu attitude towards practical issues and recommend attending discussion groups which delve deeper into these subjects. Finally, a few words about the future. We believe that spirituality should be explored scientifically, and science can only help religion improve and evolve. Indeed, the antagonism between the two is an imaginary one. Although Swami Vivekananda has suggested such a union 100 years back, we find that interaction and scientific exploration of spiritual ideas is a rarity. Often, religion is thought of as an old, rigid set of dogmas that stifles one's being. On the other hand, the Hinduism we know and practice is open to challenge and welcomes scientific exploration. For there are many things in ancient Hindu culture that might benefit modern society if they could be deciphered scientifically. Some medicinal contributions have already been popularized with the advent of Ayurveda in America, but there is a vast amount of knowledge waiting to be tapped. We've heard of many stories such as the Vimna Shastra in the Vedas being the science of aircraft design. Yet, we know of no systematic exploration by aviation engineers to see if this is a myth or not. The iron pillar at Mehrauli in Delhi is at least 1,000 years old and hasn't yet rusted. Scientists do not yet know how such a pillar could have been constructed. We would like to encourage scholars to consider unlocking some of these mysteries. The biggest barrier lies in the language. Almost all of the India's past is locked up in Sanskrit. So the only way to find out what the scientists really talked about is by learning this language. For the coming year, if there is sufficient interest, HSC proposes to set up Sanskrit classes. We need your feedback on this idea and would also like to learn what projects you might be willing to help in. With that, I'll open the floor for ideas for the next 15 minutes about what do you think the HSC could do next year, what should be our direction, how we could aim towards achieving our mission and vision. Any ideas, any sort of what events we could organize, like if you want, we need to preach Sanskrit and we haven't got a good response from the community about this, so how we could do that, what could be more important to them, how we should mold our events so that we can get, because the whole concept is trying to involve the community and that's our basic aim. We can organize one event the whole year, but we want people to come up to that event. We're not interested in organizing events throughout the year. So, any ideas of how that could be done?
We could have a debate on crucial subjects like existence of God, in which I believe many of you can be actively involved, a debate.
Right, that's an interesting idea.
And how you perceive this power we call God.
How do different people perceive and
how do different people perceive this power which we call, some people call God, some people call energy.
right, and then means how people who just believe that there is no God, why do they believe?
Yes.
What is their perception about God?
And why do they say there is no God?
Yeah.
Do they have anything to back up their views?
Right.
Or just because they think that they have come to Stanford and they are science students and they don't have anything concrete to say that God exists, that's why they say that.
Yeah.
Because I feel that it's not something which you see only exists. There are sound waves and light waves which you can't see with your own, which you can't perceive with your own eyes and ears. We know that ultraviolet, infrared rays exist, and same as with sound. There are frequencies which a human ear cannot perceive, but dogs perceive those frequencies. So we can't deny the existence of something which we cannot perceive, just for the sake of it.
Right. So basically, questioning the perceptions of people, because some people probably just believe God has to be an idol which people need to go to the temple and worship.
Yes.
Because everybody has his own perception and nobody has been open to truth or discussion about we're not encouraging them to believe in God, but we're trying to see of what people perceive and then get the community together. So that's a kind of good discussion we could get in. That's a good idea. So
I think like the, I think what we should do is like come up with a collection of such topics, and then like maybe have this like once a month or once
a
2 months
quarter
or
or
like
something.
Yeah.
whatever. Like come up with a list of questions that people
At
might
the
find
end of
interesting, and
quarter
then
or
like
sometime
That's right.
when all of you are free to put in your time into it. Like today, I can find most of you are busy with your exams.
right, yeah. That's what we want to know. What ideas can there be? We have brainstormed like what we could do. We've organized, like we thought Vedic mathematics would be good. We thought religious intolerance would be a great topic to discuss. We got members from different communities together, the Baha'i Student Association, the Christians, the Buddhists, Muslims, and all these people together, and we organized this event. So we want ideas from the community of what you're interested, because
I think we should hear from some undergrad members. We have some undergrads here and what they think is relevant or
exactly.
needs to be discussed.
Because how could things be made more interesting for undergrads?
Or what's relevant? What matters?
Anything, it's not especially spirituality or something. What do you think we could do for undergrads?
Old ideas are okay.
So, can you also talk about the Gita reading group which is
Right.
started and the temple trips?
Right, I'm sorry I missed a couple of things. I think there are two more things that we organize. One is the quarterly temple trips. So we, whoever is interested, we get 8 to 10 people. We rent a car and then people go to different temples for a day's visit and then come back. And the next thing is we recently started the Stanford Gita group. Every Tuesday evenings, there's Mr. Jairam, who's I think a postdoc student here and he's volunteered to hold these Gita discussion sessions. And so he's pretty well versed in that, and he has been pursuing it since his undergrad. He started in Pennsylvania State University, and he's now a postdoc here, and he's continuing his passion to teach people on this whatever knowledge he has gained on over the years. He's maintained a website, and he's very flexible to discussion on these topics. And he's also running it over the summer. The room has been booked, and I'll publicize it. The date is the time is going to remain the same, and it's going to be entire summer. So you can just hop in one Tuesday and see if it's interesting.
Is that by HSC? Is it?
Yeah, it's kind of we're just trying to link them together, but the effort is by Jairam himself. We just minor legal issues the administrative issues that we're just trying to handle, but it's no such effort by us. It's effort by Jairam. We're just handling the administrative issues and publicizing.
Maybe it'd be interesting to have some kind of outreach program where we can show, I mean, because the Hindu population especially for the undergrads, is definitely a small minority. So maybe to show anyone who's interested in learning about Hinduism, who are maybe not Hindu, we can have sort of explanations for them and talk to them in class.
So like the study groups.
What day of the week would that work best?
Like what time do you think undergrads would be willing to come? Because scheduling a good time, I know sometimes is good for some, sometimes is not. But majority wise, what would be a good time to organize it?
And when would you show up? You like
Thursday night, Friday afternoon.
Yeah, that's an option. That's
How about, so we'd also talked about, showing some Hinduism related movies. Maybe sometimes episodes of Mahabharata, Ramayana, or even movies which have a significance
Right.
to our culture.
We have a lot of ideas, but the thing is we want people to come up and then actually be there. Like we have ideas like, this is an idea by Tanashri, our vice president, that to have some movies like the Mahabharata or something in English which are relevant to people who could come by and just sit for an hour or so to watch a movie, which is better than probably reading something, because I think visualization gives you a better picture.
Finally, I feel like, I mean, I do not think like you get tested ideas. I think you should go out there on the field and try to test them. Like, so in this particular case, right, you should first start screening things. And if people stick, like, you can continue, otherwise drop the idea. I think like you should try to experiment rather than like try to pick up some ideas which have already been tested.
I agree with him. I think it's okay for ideas to die.
Yeah.
So I mean, we should pursue it and see how it goes.
Yeah, like for example, like you can try vector. Like I think that's the usual collecting point for people to watch like cricket matches or whatever, like until this time. So you can probably see if like they could give you a room for an hour and a half.
Reservations and administrative stuff is not an issue.
Okay.
The issue is for the interest of the people. So that is, you said that try it out and see.
I think it would be really meaningful to have difficult discussions, like maybe like the one we'll have right now, but especially on ethics. For instance, the Mahabharata is full of ethical dilemmas, and especially not much has changed in the world since then. You still, people are killing people, and you're having to face some of these problems again and again. It's easy to think that somehow people were different earlier on, but I don't think so. So, what do different traditions say about tackling a problem? And within Hinduism, we have so much, variety in opinions. So, examining the ethical nature, I don't think there are any black and white answers, but just provoking thought would be useful.
Any other ideas? Or we can then delve into the discussion of what HSC is being currently involved in. Okay, then for that I'd like to call Swamik, who's pretty well versed in what the dispute HSC is all about, who's involved in.
Alright, this is going to be an interesting discussion, and we're doing this on camera just so people who are not here can see what we talk about. I'd like to start with our usual community prayer. And this prayer says, may we be protected together, and we as in all that lives, not just Hindus, everyone. May we be nourished together. We will both act with great heroism. We will undertake invigorating studies. We will never poison our minds against each other. Oh, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So those of you who like to follow, please be around. Om Sahana Bhavatu
Sahanau Bhunattu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Okay. So, there was a report which was recently published by a group of students, not students actually, a group of people, and it's called Lying Religiously, which claims that the National Hindu Students Council has links to right-wing groups and basically uses the local chapters of the HSC in a very deceptive manner, and most HSC members do not know of such links. And what I'm going to do is, what I've done is I've asked them to send me a report that I can read out. The condensed form of the report is actually quite long. So, and I also have a rejoinder from the National Hindu Students Council, which I'll read out as well. And we'll go from there. So, we tried to get them here, but unfortunately, none of the people involved in this report are in the area, so they sent this mail. But we do have Sudeep Roy from the National HSC, and we will be asking a few of these questions. Actually, before I do this, I think it makes sense to perhaps give a little introduction. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Would you rather sit here?
When you come here for a moment. Yeah, you come over here. Alright. could you just tell us how you have been involved with the HSC and
So namaste. My name is Sudeep, and I am a graduate of UC Berkeley. I finished my undergraduate studies there in 2005, and currently I am in San Francisco. I stay with my parents. I'm starting school again this fall at San Jose State University. So I'm very happy to be here. We've been trying to schedule a visit, a meeting with HSC Stanford students for a really long time, and kind of unusual topic to be here for. But we had come last year, myself and another young adult, to meet with Siddhartha last year, I believe it was, and we were trying to figure out a time when we could come and have a further meeting. But just a little brief introduction. So I was involved, and I got involved within the Student Council in my sophomore year at UC Berkeley, and at the time the club had actually gone defunct. So it was, the organization was there at Berkeley, and after a semester it kind of died out. So myself and 2 or 3 other people came back and brought it back from dead, and we were involved in the leadership for about 2 years. So I was an officer for 2 years, and subsequent to that, other people kind of came and got involved. And that chapter is still going. So I wouldn't call myself a founder of that group, but kind of sort of involved in that. And then towards my later time there at Berkeley, I attended a few National Hindu Student Council events. That was my first exposure to Hindu Student Council beyond the chapter level. And it does turn out there are over 81 chapters in the country and even outside of the US, which is kind of a cool idea. But I have attended probably about 3 or 4 national retreats, camps, if you will, which have been held in all different parts of the country. I've also attended a couple of meets, which are like leadership training. So after I graduated, I was requested to serve as a California-wide, I guess you could call it regional coordinator. And so I was in touch with the chapters here at Stanford, sort of, kind of, and also with chapters in UC San Diego, UC Irvine, UC Riverside, sort of UCLA, and maybe University of Southern California. So that's kind of been ongoing, but now the Southern California is in transition, so I'm no longer really the active representative for that region. And I'm kind of transitioning out of the Northern Cal thing too, because we all move into other phases in life. So that's kind of my background. And I just returned actually last week from a National Hindu Student Council camp. These happen every year annually. And it was held Memorial Day weekend in North Carolina, Raleigh. So it was a pretty cool event. There was about 40, 50 people who came out, had a nice 3-4 days of interesting satsang and so on. So thank you. Continue.
you can maybe switch up to other questions for it?
Sure.
Because do we have any members in the audience who can represent the report writers? Okay, so I'm going to have to represent them and I'll do my best. So, yeah, please have.
Could we, I have a request. Is it possible to ask everybody to come forward just a little bit, because it seems like or we can move forward to either way. It seems a little bit.
Audience inertia.
So perhaps as you all are moving, I should mention that I asked Somik here before I came that I really would rather this be more of a discussion, kind of a respectful, open session rather than a debate. And I don't see it as something that need be so formal and kind of us versus them.
No, it's not good.
I understand.
Yeah,
I understand.
Yeah,
but
we want to eat you up. Don't worry.
But I consider myself here just as a student, current, and as a formerly active member of a local chapter of the Student Council, but still somebody who's involved regionally and nationally in some regard. So I'm kind of here to perhaps share my experiences on what my experience with HSC National has been, and hopefully that as somebody goes on.
We'll get to that.
Sure.
We'll have a seat.
Would you like
So I'm going to start reading the report, and it's The summary of the report is 5 pages. I'll try to read it clearly. If you miss something, just stop me. Okay? Dear members of HSC Stanford, greetings. This letter is in response to a request by a member officer of HSC Stanford to either send a representative from the Stanford community who is a current Stanford student or write a letter so we can read out your arguments to the audience, referring to a public discussion on the above issue to be held in Stanford. Since we do not have such a representative, we are sending this letter, which we would request to be shared in full with the audience in the spirit of an open and fair discussion. The Campaign to Stop Funding Hate, CSFH, is a small collective of Indians, Indian Americans, and Americans who have for the last decade exposed the links between Hindutva and extremist Hindu nationalist ideology organizations in North America and the Sangh Parivar in India. As several of you are probably already aware, Hindutva has been responsible for mass violence for over 75 years now, including the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi and the more recent Gujarat carnage that left more than 2,000 Indian minorities dead. On April 13, 2007, CSFH published a report, Lying Religiously, the Hindu Students' Council and the Politics of Deception. It's called LYR, Liar, available on the website. In this report, we have documented in detail a variety of linkages, past and present, between the National HSC and the Sangh Parivar in India and the USA, especially Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America. Our evidence is based almost entirely on documents and official statements of the HSC and the Sangh Parivar. We understand, and have said so in our report and press releases, that most local HSC chapter members have no idea that the HSC is in any way connected to the Sangh. The National HSC systematically hides these links from the chapter membership, and this is what we refer to as the politics of deception. In response to our report, the National HSC has issued 2 public statements thus far. The first was a simple dismissal of the report without any substantive engagement or challenges to the evidence presented. And the second was an ad hominem attack. Ad hominem means, attacking the people and not the arguments. On the CSFH collective, once again without any substantive arguments or evidence to counter what we have presented in the report. Since there has been no substantive engagement by the National HSC with the arguments in our report so far, our first request is for all of you who are genuinely interested in this issue to read the report in its entirety. While we cannot present you the entire report in the short note, we have included below the following, keeping in mind space restrictions for making photocopies of this for the audience. We have copies out there if you want to figure out. One sample piece of the evidence that conclusively proves the connection between the National HSC and the Sangh Parivar. That's going to follow. This is just a summary. We've included such a sample to show all of you how comprehensive and detailed our investigation has been. 3 other pieces of evidence posed as questions to the National HSC so far in our campaign, none of which have received any response so far, and an extract from an email exchange with an HSC Stanford member on the question of CSFH's ideology and political leanings. We include this extract because we find that, especially when people have not had a chance to read the report, they tend to take the National HSC's ad hominems as adequate reasons to doubt the report's contents. So then begins the first one, which is the sample piece of evidence. The Internet Protocol Map. In our report, we have documented how the National HSC built and continues to maintain the Sangh's global internet infrastructure. The evidentiary source for the IP map is a neutral site, Domain Tools. The IP map is probably the most damning piece of evidence against the National HSC that establishes deep, systematic, and undeniable links to the rest of the Sangh Parivar. It is not an incidental set of connections, but a deliberate and carefully built infrastructure. We have showed that a range of Sangh Parivar organizations, including the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, Hindu Swayamsevak Sangh, Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America, India Development and Relief Fund, Seva International Organizer, and Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad are all hosted by the Global Hindu Electronic Networks, GHEN/HinduNet, a project of the National HSC. The domain registration pages for all these websites list HinduNet Inc. as the admin organization and/or Ajay Shah, the first president of the HSC, as the admin name. For a detailed explanation, see our press release, blah, blah, blah. So this is the main point. So the IP addresses and the servers are all together. That's what the point we're really saying. The second one is 3 other pieces of evidence posed as questions to the National HSC for which we have yet to get a response. First one, since the release of our report, the National HSC has been scrambling to cover up the IP-based links by a two-step process. It has changed the admin information for hscnet.org and also changed the contact page on HinduNet, all in an attempt to distance the National HSC from the Sun's electronic infrastructure. We've documented the National HSC's efforts to clean up its image in our press release dated June 3, 2007. Second, in 1993, the HSC claimed that it became fully independent of the Sun. Yet, in December 95, the HSC was an invited participant at the Vishwa Sun Shibir Global Sun Training Camp. According to the press release of the organizers of that camp, all its delegates were from several affiliated organizations of the RSS, which operate abroad as Hindu Swayamsevak Sangh, Seva International, Vishwa Hindu Parishad, Hindu Students Council, Friends of India Society International. And the camp was conducted, this is in quotes, was conducted on RSS ideology for NRI, non-resident Indian workers, end of quotes. How did the National HSC gain access to the sanctum sanctorum of an RSS Shibir without being a member of the Sun? See more in our press release dated April 23, 2007. Third one, despite all disavowals by the HSC leadership about the relationship to the Sun, the VHP of America has repeatedly and most recently in 2003 said that the HSC was its project. Here is an extract from an archived VHPA page from 2003. The programs and projects are defined by the local community needs, the programs and projects are defined by the local community needs within the broad framework of the Parishad mission. The ongoing projects are Hindu Students Council, it is the youth wing of VHPA functioning in 50 universities and colleges in the USA, close quotes. Given the official HSC position that it severed all links with the VHP America in 1993, this amounts to a minimum of 10 years of deception. Does the HSC deny that this link existed at least until 2003 officially? The VHP America website still lists the HSC as an organizational component, in quotes, that it, quote, facilitates and promotes, end quote. Is the VHPA website also, in quotes, based on inaccuracies and, in quotes, outdated information? See more in our press release on April 23, 2007. And finally, the email exchange on the neutrality of our report. And just so you know, the email exchange was with me, so I should mention that for the sake of neutrality. So a HSC member officer from Stanford wrote to us asking why our report should not be seen as biased by a broadly secular left. I didn't use that term, that's in quotes. Orientation. Here is an extract from our response. Left versus right. Let me be blunt. The left versus right dichotomy you set up is, in our opinion, a red herring. It allows you and anybody else who uses it to create an excuse for not taking the content of the report seriously. It is like saying that the International Initiative for Justice report on atrocities of women in Gujarat is not to be trusted because it is written by feminists, or that any report put out by the National Campaign for Dalit Human Rights is biased in favor of Dalits and therefore cannot be taken seriously. We have repeatedly emphasized that our report has nothing to do with our left positionality beyond why we took up this investigation. That is, our data is not, in quotes, tainted by left sources and therefore biased. Our data is perfectly neutral in as much as it either comes from the Sun itself or comes from perfectly neutral spaces such as domain tools. How then are you making the assertion that our report is tainted? Why don't you instead engage the data and show as to how the left or liberal position taints the data? Let's take an example and work it through. The IP map, which figures prominently in our report, it gives the section number and all that. The IP map reveals that the National HSC runs a significant part of the global RSS electronic infrastructure, including hosting the VHP and RSS itself. The number of Sun orgs that HSC hosts is so many that it cannot but be systematic. How else can we read it? Where does any left or not left positionality come into this analysis at all? Evidence of this kind leaves no gray areas. So unless you can show, for instance, in the case of the IP map, that there is somehow a sinister left thought involved, your assertions are quite baseless and amount to a weak attempt at defending and covering up for the Sun. After I got this reply, I sent this to the National HSC asking for each of these points, and I got a reply on that. And basically after that we decided to have this event. So also other claims that have been thrown around now. Yeah, this is now continuing on beyond the email reply. So also other claims that have been thrown around without substantiation include the claim that the CSFH report is hate-filled. We ask those who have suggested such easy dismissals of the report find one instance of where in our report we express any hatred towards any HSC member, or on the other hand, as to why pointing out a connection between the National HSC and the extremist Sangh Parivar is tantamount to Hindu bashing, unless of course the Sangh is the same as Hinduism. We are very pleased to see that the members of HSC Stanford have thought it serious enough to hold a public discussion of our report. We hope this will be a forum in which the substantive issues facing Hindus in America are genuinely addressed, and wish the event all success. We are, as always, open to any individual or groups who wish to engage with any particular details in our report. We urge all HSC members in the Indian American community at large to examine our report in detail and arrive at your own conclusions. HSC chapters all across the US have a special responsibility. The National HSC derives its legitimacy through a claim of an extensive chapter network across the US. It is your responsibility to decide whether you wish to be part of such a legitimation or the forces of the Hindu right wing. We urge all HSC chapters across the US to not just dissociate from the National HSC, but to reposition any campus-based Hindu organization as distinct from the Sun. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And he has a footnote there. He said, we say most because on some occasions we have found evidence of first-generation Indian Americans who are connected to HSCs at the local level, having a clear understanding of the link, and or on other occasions second-generation HSC members who have distinct connections to the Sun through family circles, being clear about the ideology. So that was the CSFH mail. Now we had a response from the National Hindu Students Council, and they write, this is an internal memorandum sent to the HSC which forwarded to the group today. A response to the controversial report released by Campaign to Stop Funding Hate. As many of you are aware, a report released in April by a group calling themselves the Campaign to Stop Funding Hate alleged that the Hindu Students Council is under the control of certain groups in India and secretly promoting a certain extremist agenda. The report makes its claims by citing various disparate pieces of information without regard as to whether the information is current or accurate, and by attacking the personal lives of current and former members in a McCarthy-like manner while pretending those ad hominem attacks have real meaning. Again, ad hominem is the thing that I explained earlier. People do not argue with this. Since the report was anonymously written, HSC investigated the antecedents of those behind the report as well as the Campaign to Stop Funding Hate. It has found that the report was primarily written by members of the Forum of Inqilabi Leftists. Inqilabi is Urdu for revolutionary, a notorious fringe extremist group far beyond any mainstream thought in the United States. FOIL, as the group is known, pursues an agenda tied to a warped view of Indian politics, using a corrupt view of the American political philosophy that it labels as, in quotes, progressive to hide behind. They call themselves progressive, but any cursory examination of their writings reveals bigotry and intolerance that belies the concept. We have included a press release that draws attention to the extreme views of FOIL. We know this may be a lot to handle for many of you. You aren't in the HSC for any controversial reasons. You join HSC because you want to celebrate and learn about your culture and heritage. Frankly, that's also the case for me and the rest of the executive board. However, the report makes aspersions on our characters as national leaders. These aspersions have no basis in fact. And by association, the report puts you all under the same aspersions. We want to assure you that we will not let this outrage go unanswered, and we will not stop until every single person in the HSC is worry-free about this libelous and defamatory attack. Unfortunately, that day is not today. HSC recently learned that the members of FOIL have started contacting certain professors on various campuses, urging them to press on and distribute the report as well as write articles attacking HSC in the local campus newspaper. Some of those professors in turn have started either questioning HSC chapter officers about FOIL's claims or have started distributing the report on campus. We have included a copy of the email sent by FOIL so you can see exactly what they are writing, as the chapter officer was able to get it from a concerned professor at the University of Texas. A team of HSC members and officers has come together to write a full, point-by-point rebuttal to the propaganda that has been published by FOIL. We hope to soon have it released and fully debunk the report. However, the mendacious quality of the report means that the rebuttal will take some time to complete. In the meantime, we are providing you with a short write-up on the egregious errors, misinformation, and factual inaccuracies in the report, so that you are able to answer questions that may come your way. The short write-up is in the PDF attachment to the email, which you have now. And as always, if you have any questions, you're welcome to contact the regional coordinator or any member of the executive board. This is sent by the president of the Hindu Students Council, Bikuj Trivedi. So that's as far as the official word we have from each. Now they've sent me another the press release, and I'm deliberately not going to read it out because it gets very personal. And the simple reason that I've also not read out any of the personal bits on the campaign to stop funding aid in the report. I'd like to keep this as non-personal and focused on the facts as possible. Does anyone think that we should get into the personal side? Okay.
Personal, you mean by what?
Personal meaning taking individual names and talking about their family antecedents and then really getting deep. And I can assure you that you have, they've matched each other. Point by point. I mean, it'd be hard to better move in the amount of stuff that is.
Personally, basically going issue by issue and what happened, and delving into how the issue came up, how the next issue was built, and
yeah, I mean,
attacking the people behind each other.
attacking the people
Either
behind.
the members of the HSC reported what they've done. Either the members of...
Could Supriya, could you come forward? We really need to have this.
No, I don't feel comfortable.
All right.
All I know is from there in the emails, but that's what Stephanie got there as well.
Yeah.
Parents that singled out individual people instead of...
Yeah. So that's, I found that distasteful as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the evidence that they claim, and I would have brought the email response I had, which was a pretty good response from the National HSC, but since we have a member here, I'd rather let him talk. So the first one, the core of this entire report is based on the IP addresses and the claim that all the Sangh Parivar servers are hosted in the same area, same space, and the HSC handles it. I think that's what they say. The IP map is probably the most damning piece of evidence against the National HSC that establishes deep, systematic, and undeniable links to the rest of the Sangh Parivar. It is not an incidental set of connections, but a deliberate and carefully built infrastructure. So, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm learning about all this as in the same regard that you are. I should mention that I don't hold an office as such in the national level as a treasurer, president, or anything like that. I haven't contributed to any of these reports or press releases, so I can't comment on the nature of any of those. But there was a rebuttal that was sent internal memorandum, which was sent to all of the officers of the chapters nationally, and that is available to everybody. I have copies of that if people are interested when they're reading. That's an internal document. But, and it's internal in the sense that it's kind of a shorter version, more comprehensive version is supposed to be released publicly shortly. But the first question was about
the IP addresses.
The IP addresses. So again, I joined Hindu Student Council, or got involved in 2001. So, and I haven't been around for when most of these comments go back. They're talking about Ken. And I've spoken to, prior to coming here, I've spoken to some of the representatives from the National HSC to receive clarification. Because that's one thing I think it's actually good that when you're criticized, you're forced to look into the facts. I never questioned these facts, but it did give me an opportunity to ask the national board members, executive officers, kind of what is the history and what is it that's being talked about. So the first, actually I have a copy of this, or can I have a copy?
Yeah. Which one do you want? Do you want this?
Yeah. No, you hold on. There, just so I can make sure to answer your question. So I'm going to answer to the best of my ability. And based on my experiences, based on the knowledge that I have. So
I don't mean to put you in the spot. I have the response from the HSC member. I can open that up if that helps you.
Do you have response to all of these?
Not each and every one of them, but I did have to this particular one.
Okay.
It's up to you.
Which is IP?
Yeah. Raghav, can you connect to the net? You can open up my email as well.
I mean, while you're working on that, I can just tell you what I know, which is that, so it says the Internet Protocol map, or IP map, demonstrates that it shows a deep, systematic, and undeniable link to the rest of Sangh Parivar. That's the first statement. 2, that it is a deliberate and carefully built infrastructure. 3, that it includes all of these Sangh organizations, and that are all hosted on Global Hindu Electronic Networks. And 4, that Global Hindu Electronic Networks is a project of the National HSC. And 5, that all of these are under the admin name or organization of Ajay Shah, who's the first president of HSC. So the first thing that sticks out to me is that Ajay Shah is mentioned as the first president of HSC, and that's a factual inaccuracy. Ajay Shah was involved in Hindu Student Council, from what I understand, many, many years ago. Hindu Student Council was started in 1990, and in 1993 became its own kind of private organization. There were a group of 30 people who were part of the, I guess, core board at the national level, and he was one of them, but he wasn't kind of, there wasn't a president at the national level until 2003. So many, many, many years later. The thing about Global Hindu Electronics Network, my understanding is that GHEN, as it is called, was originally a project that Hindu Student Council created back in 1993, I believe. And it was intended to be a resource, kind of like a Hindu encyclopedia. So, you've always wanted to research some information on Hinduism. You can go to one portal and find that information. And that's originally what Global Hindu Electronic Network was. It was a project that came out of Hindu Student Council. And what happened was that over time it became too much work, that Hindu Student Council didn't have enough resources at the national level to handle the project. So in 1999, Global Hindu Electronic Network, the whole website, the domain, everything was given over to a group of individuals, and it became a private incorporated, like it became a private corporation basically. And then the name was subsequently changed to hindunet.org or hindunet.com. Maybe both of the URLs are the same. And from that point onward, 1999, Hindu Student Council did not really have any control over HinduNet or their activities. One of the things that came out of that exchange, I guess, is that the new owners of this private corporation agreed to, since Hindu Student Council was giving all this content, all this encyclopedic content of Hindu, and if you go to the website, you'll see what's on there. It's very commercial now, but it has a lot of things like links to bhajans and information about Hinduism, blah, blah, blah. And my understanding is that the new owners of hindunet.org agreed to give Hindu Student Council free web hosting, and web hosting is expensive, so they took it up. And if you look at the map, do you have internet access here? So there is a map or IP map or a colorful, I guess, illustration given of, let's see if you can.
Where should I go?
Huh?
Where should I go? So you are seeing. Tell me the address.
It's HSC Truth out.stopfundinghate.org/ch3.html.
Is this the one?
/ch3.html. Yeah. So you can scroll down, and this is the IP map.
This one.
Yeah. So on this IP map, is given a list of various organizations which are hosted on the HinduNet server. So a Global Hindu Electronic Networks, to reiterate, was a project that Hindu Student Council did initiate back in 1993, and from 1999 onwards was its own private corporation run by hindunet.org or hindunet.com. And Hindu Student Council continued to have its web service hosted on there. So the statement here is that we have shown that a range of Sangh-Parivar organizations, including XYZ, are all hosted on Global Hindu Electronic Networks, a project of the National HSC. The first half of that sentence is true, that all of these organizations happen to be on this, not on the same server, but happen that one company, which is a private company, hindunet.org, assigns IP addresses to various organizations. Hindu Student Council is one of them.
So do these individuals happen to have any connections like via HSC members or HSC? Like who are these third people who have taken over the Hindu network?
That I do not know. And I don't know for sure. My understanding is that Ajay Shah is still part of that. Ajay Shah here is mentioned as the first president of HSC, which is not true.
Is this organization in the US?
HinduNet.org, I believe, is based in the US. Yeah. So the IP addresses are not hosted on the same server. I don't know too much about.
So are you
IP
a member of the National HSC organization, so to speak, as in, would you know their agenda and what they do?
Well, I mean, I can tell you my experiences, and my experiences are, so I have spoken on behalf of Hindu Student Council National, or HSC National, if you will, in visiting chapters and speaking about what that's what we're trying to coordinate here at Stanford too earlier.
So in other words, you're saying that these IP addresses they may have been the same company. The second part of the association really being made is because they are all similar, this proves the link with the Sangh-Parivar.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to start addressing that question.
Okay.
So,
Does the National HSC raise funds?
yeah, we'll get there. I've got that one next.
Okay. Well, I mean, just to connect to that here, it's saying a deliberate and carefully built infrastructure, and that National HSC has built and continues to maintain the Sangh's global internet infrastructure. That's a factual inaccuracy because although HSC's IP may be owned or controlled by HinduNet.org, all of these other organizations have their own IP addresses and have their own websites, and HSC has nothing to do with them at the national level.
Okay.
And Global Hindu Electronic Network is no longer a project of Hindu Student Council from 1999, so it's been 8 years that it's been under the ownership or control of HinduNet.org, and that's a private company.
Okay, just to move us along.
I'm sorry, yeah, go ahead.
This is the mail I had sent. So after receiving the mail from the report writers, I had a small exchange with them, and then after receiving the last mail, I wrote to the National HSC, and this is the mail I sent, asking very specific questions. One is, does the National HSC do fundraisers that aid other organizations in any way, as mentioned in the report? Second, are local HSC chapters expected to raise money for the National HSC? Because as far as I remember, in the Stanford HSC, we've never done any fundraisers whatsoever. So what happened before that? We wanted to know that. Third thing is, the report writers are focused entirely on the IP addresses, which is what we just talked about. If it is really a simple case of inertia by which the servers were not shifted, I would have hoped to see that here rejoined, and I did not see that. So I was wondering why it was a personal attack instead of just telling them, hey, we just didn't get around to it. Then, could you clarify your position? There is no question there is a lot of bad blood between South Asian organizations on either side. Unless leadership initiatives are taken to improve the atmosphere, things are only going to get better for our community, with the majority getting stuck in between two vociferous entities who will debate endlessly but never talk to each other. What is the National HSC doing to engage in this topic in a positive and constructive manner? And I heard back from Rishi Bhutada, hope I got his name right. So he writes, got your mail, and he says he was at the annual HSC camp, which is I guess with you. He says, here are his answers to the first question. National HSC doesn't run fundraisers for other organizations. Chapters make the decision on which organizations they wish to support. We'll suggest organizations that chapters can fundraise for, based on our investigation to make sure there's no financial mismanagement going on. We also recommend the chapters donate money to the organization they are interested in directly, and send it to HSC National to prevent additional overhead in time and money management. Organizations that we normally suggest include AIM for Seva, run by Swami Dayanand Saraswati, International Association for Human Values run by Art of Living, Ekal Vidyalaya, Indicor, and Conservation International. Each organization serves a different kind of humanitarian cause, and the above list is not exhaustive by any means. Many efforts go for local charitable organizations, and we fully support that. Second question, do local chapters give money to the HSC? The answer is no. Local chapters are never asked to give money to the National HSC. Most chapters need all the funding they can get. For that matter, National HSC isn't exactly well funded either. HSC will fund chapters that don't get university funding on an event and need basis though. And the third one, which is why they were focusing on the personal, not the IP at this issue, says the authors of the report have made the claim that HSC is the operator or manager of the websites of numerous other organizations, some based in India and some based in the United States. The authors thus charge that this makes HSC a purveyor of a certain agenda and philosophy. Unfortunately, if the authors had bothered to check tax or incorporation records like a reputable journalist or researcher would, they would have been told that the entity hosting those websites, HinduNet, is a for-profit corporation, which is what he just said. HSC maintained a Hindu encyclopedia until 1999, at which point it found it could exchange for HinduNet. At that point, it found it could not maintain the site. It found a taker for the site content in HinduNet in exchange for HinduNet acknowledging HSC's role in gathering the content. Neither HSC nor any of its membership leadership has had a role in HinduNet's development, operations, or decision-making since the handover. The only relationship HSC has now with HinduNet is that HinduNet is its current web hosting provider. Until now, I'm not certain any of us knew what other websites were being hosted by HinduNet. I certainly never paid attention to it. HSC is in any case is in the process of shifting hosting companies, not due to the report, but due to bandwidth needs. We are planning to create an online repository in which chapters can share presentations, photos, event ideas, discussion topics, etc. And the fourth point is, we've always considered HSC as a forum for various viewpoints about Hinduism, so to be openly and freely discussed, so the students can make up their own minds, but still have no problem identifying themselves as Hindu. All of us that were chapter officers ran our chapters in this manner. One of the things the report cites are various speakers over the years at chapters and regional national events that have ties to RSS, HSS, PHP America, etc., as though this proves structural linkage. We were founded with support from PHP America, something we've always been open about and always appreciative of. We are independent now though. Of course, their neutral methodology doesn't include the much higher number of speakers that have no such background. The problem with those behind CSFH is that they're acting in a deceptive manner. They're not liberal progressives like they claim, but they have an extreme political agenda in mind, and they're not disclosing it when pushing their report. When one side acts in a deceptive manner, it becomes impossible to engage. If you have any suggestions or out-of-box thinking to solve this problem, any ideas are welcome. So, and then of course, the previous mail was sent by Murli Nataraj's faces. Meaning that he claims the left-right dichotomy doesn't apply because the report was written using neutral methodology. I'd argue it applies completely because of their selective citations and their ideological blinders make it such that they ignore everything else HSC does because we are willing to be open and inclusive to anyone wanting to learn or discuss about Hinduism, no matter a person's background or political viewpoint, and they cannot tolerate that. So that's the response we have on some of the key points. There's one question that we directly asked you, and that is, since the release of our report, the National HSC has been scrambling to cover up the IP-based things, which here he says that they were doing it anyways, not because of the report. But here their question is, we're following a two-step process, change the admin information and the contact page on HinduNet, all in an attempt to distance the National HSC from the Sun's infrastructure.
So this is the information that I have been that has been made available because I asked about this to our General Secretary Hashu Lanki, and the first question was about covering up the IP-based links, changing the admin information for HSC.org, hscnet.org. hscnet.org is the National Hindu-Student Council website, and the premise there was that apparently in January of this year, this happened last year in January and it happened again this year, is that hindunet.org is supposed to renew the IP, right? They're supposed to renew the domain name, and it didn't happen. And so it was delayed, and so last year, somehow we managed to get around that. And this year the same thing happened in January, is that the domain name was supposed to be renewed and it didn't happen. And so this time around, information was sent to hindunet.org saying, okay, if you're not going to renew our information, then we're going to take the name back and we're going to do it ourselves. And as it turns out, that coincided with the approximate date that this report was released.
Couldn't have been worse timing.
Yeah, that time. As far as the second half, changing the contact, so that was on hscnet.org, which is the National Hindu Student Council website. As far as changing the contact page on HinduNet, so HinduNet, if you recall, is the portal which was run by Ken and now is run by hindunet.org. And hindunet.org, this is something, in all honesty, that happened following the report, which is that previously contact info in the contact us page did indicate the name Hindu Student Council, and then below that it said, for any inquiries, contact Ajay Shah. And Ajay Shah, as mentioned previously, is involved with hindunet.org, is one of the stakeholders, whatever. Subsequently to this report being published, hindunet.org was contacted, and apparently this is not the first time it's been contacted, but that, hey, Hindu Student Council's information is on your webpage, it doesn't belong there, so please remove it. And so that has now been changed, and it doesn't say Hindu Student Council. So the question becomes, why was it on there in the first place? And the simple response is, we didn't know, because just in the same way it's mentioned later on, VHPA lists Hindu Student Council as being actively a youth group or something like that, and Hindu Student Council's name is all over the web. Does that make us necessarily associated with whoever puts our name there? Not necessarily. We don't go to hindunet.org and actively look at other websites to see if when I say we, I'm speaking on behalf of Hindu Student Council at the national level, but again, I can only speak on my experience, which is that, there aren't, and I wish I had a PowerPoint presentation. I could show you that the leadership beyond the chapter is really not a whole lot. There's probably just a small number of people who are able to work at kind of providing resources to chapters nationally. And you can ask Siddhartha, even before this whole report thing came out, the kind of discussion we had, which was really kind of like, okay, what does your chapter do? What can we help with, and how can we try to create more unity in this region of Northern California?
Does the audience have any questions at this point?
Yes, feel free.
How many people at the national level?
So that's something I unfortunately don't have the PowerPoint with me. I can tell you that there's a board of, I believe, 4 officers nationally who we heard the name Rishi Bhutada. He's the Vice President of Outreach and Public Relations. And then there's Harshavardhan Vallanki, who is the General Secretary, the President. You heard a remark by him. His name is Nikunj Trivedi. In total, there's 5 people who are kind of working at the national level. There's also a group of advisors who comprise different members of the community. There's also included in that advisors group members of the spiritual community, like various saints and Swamijis. Swami Dayanand Saraswati of Ashrita Gurukulam in Pennsylvania is part of that group, and there are other kind of holy people and so on who are consulted on kind of how to have the activities. Outside of that, there are kind of national teams. Like there's teams that help with fundraising, there's teams that help with public relations, etc. And then there are regional, I guess you could say, coordinators.
So how many teams are total?
If you include everybody, so the one thing to mention is that all of these people are working, maybe they're working on a national level, but somehow they're involved with a local chapter. Most of them, if not all of them. And all of these people are young adults, so there aren't any older kind of fuddy-duddy type folks. These are all kind of, young adults or recent college graduates, I should say. But if you were to take all these people, I would estimate between 30 and 50.
Yeah. I just would like to get
the
second answer. So the second question they want.
I actually have a bigger question.
Sure.
Sorry. So I have a question for the CSFH. Like, what exactly is the problem that we're trying to address? Is there allegation that the connection of HSC with all these Sankalya organizations, in some sense they are trying to influence the people here? Because HSC actively disengages itself with any of this political propaganda. In which case, how does it think HSC is motivating people in the wrong direction?
No,
What
so-
exactly is
So
that?
initially, I think the perception was that they were claiming that local chapters were also doing this deception. But then after that,
what is the deception? Is that
the
like
deception is that
HSC?
people who are interested in Hinduism think they're getting into Hinduism, but actually are getting into Hindutva.
Okay.
And if anybody can put it in a more succinct manner, please feel free to jump in. So that's the deception as I understood it. And so I got the impression that initially they were saying that the chapters were actively being deceptive, but I took them on at that point because I don't remember anything in the HSC, Stanford HSC here. So then the report basically claims that the chapters they themselves don't know about these connections, which I think is true to an extent. I mean, forget about whether connections exist or not. I had no clue until I think sometime last year when Linda told me that the HSC was started by VHP America.
But
I had
that
no
is
idea.
irrelevant.
That's irrelevant to this.
Right.
But that's basically the deception that they're claiming, that because we're connected, affiliated with the National HSC, and because the National HSC has these IP addresses, which are also shared by all these other folks, HSS, RSS and all that. So because they are connected to political parties, we are also somehow connected through this national linkage. That's the deception.
So yeah, I don't see a problem with connection, like, but is that like resulting in active, like, spreading of evil or bad deeds or like what
One of
exactly
the
is
things
happening?
is the
That's,
sending of
let's see,
money.
do you have a response to that?
No, it's a different question.
Okay, so let me try to address that. So you were asking,
So for example, like,
for instance, you were asking a so what question, as in,
Yeah.
what if there was a connection?
so like for example, it's something like this, right? Like a descendant of Adolf Hitler has to be bad. That is like ridiculous, right? So I mean, I'm trying to draw an analogy. Like, yeah, so these people had connections with that. So what? And also, like, take another analogy, right? Like the founder of Asha, as we discussed in a list or whatever, he had some leftist leanings or whatever. But who cares, right? Asha has a defined program. They work for this, and that is what we are concerned about. If the founder happens to have some connections, like, yeah, maybe he had. That doesn't reflect in the organization.
Well,
So where is the bad things coming from?
but I think that's a good question, and I think now I've got the CSFH hat on.
Yeah.
I'll take off after this period. But basically, there is a difference between, so they're saying that it's okay to have Hindutva connections, but you got to openly say so. So if you believe that, yes, if you want to be linked to Hindutva, you've got to tell people that that's what you're doing. So he says that if you're having the links and you're not telling people, that's the deception you're doing. So they're not discussing whether it's evil or not. They're saying that people decide.
No, one of the evil claims is like selling them, raising money and giving.
So, Supriya?
And they also clearly mention that Hindutva are in charge of a lot of massacres in India, so they are
Yes.
claiming affiliation with Hindutva is condoning violence.
Could you speak up a little bit?
Sorry, I think that the argument in the thing that you read at first,
Yeah.
where it talks about Hindutva being associated with like all these massacres, is clearly saying that to be affiliated in Hindutva movement is to condone violence. So I do think
They are making that association, yes. Well, they are making that association, but I don't think that's central to the argument in the sense that they're saying if you really want to believe it, that's not the deception. The deception is not telling people that you do believe in it. So that's the central argument.
Right, but probably the founders of the HSC actually didn't want to like engage in this kind of things. For example, just as the founder of Asha didn't want to be engaged in like, didn't want like Asha to be left oriented. He wanted it for a purpose which is distinct from his own personality. Similarly, like the founders of the HSC might have wanted an organization that is distinct from their personality, right? In which case, like how, like all these associations matter for nothing, right? So my question is like, what is their point? Like, what are the bad things that are coming out of this association? Is it the potential for bad things that could come, or like have they already been seen, or like?
So let me get to the heart of your question. You're saying you're still asking so what?
Yeah,
as in
still asking so what?
Yeah, Supriya.
I mean, I think that's what we're trying to disentangle is whether the people who founded it were dissociated from the personalities or were pushing the agenda. And right now, I don't think it's clear whether the founders of HSC were keeping it separate from their own political ideologies or whether they were trying to push the young minds of the future to believe a certain thing.
Exactly. So like the
It's
bad,
unclear.
the bad thing that could potentially happen is that they're pushing like young minds into a state of like frenzy or like
Or a
fundamentalism.
specific point of view without providing an alternative. Like saying this is Hinduism without saying this is how some people perceive it.
So again, we need to come to the core thing. The discussion of what Hindutva represents to many people is a completely different discussion, which we're not doing here. We're only focused on deception. are we following Hindutva and telling people it's Hinduism, or are we not? Yeah.
But I think central to that is saying that Hindutva is only one way of approaching Hinduism. So regardless of what Hindutva represents, it's only one way that some people choose to practice or believe Hinduism. So if that's what they're affiliating with, that's fine. But you have to say this is one specific way that people engage with Hinduism.
Right. So your proof should be something of the form like HSC supports Hinduism as the only form of HSC supports Hindutva as the only form of Hinduism. Right. That is how like your proof should be.
That's what they would suppose we had.
That's what they would argue.
That's what they would argue. I'm sure.
Sorry. I meant like CSFH.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I mean that is how the proof should go, right? Like HSC is like teaching Hindutva as Hinduism, and this is the wrong things that is happening because of HSC.
So basically, here's the interesting thing that I'm seeing. You know, my HSC hat is on. So this is very difficult.
How we can assume your CSFH for the entire discussion?
HSC broke out from the PHP of North America, right? So from 93 to 99, when HSC owned this portal, right? Were these websites, for these artist websites, were those part of the portal at that point as well? Or did those come on after 99?
So that is an excellent question. I don't know the answer to that because, again, this is just what I have heard, you know, from officers or whatever. My understanding is that no, they were not affiliated. But, you know, somebody would have to go and look into those records, and where are those records? I don't really know. And I mean, it's like you're asking who had IPs and how was it connected 12 years ago, right? 1993 to 1999. Well, 8 to 14 years ago. There's one thing I can state just that might add to this discussion, and I'm glad we're having more of a discussion, is that 1993 is the day that in the student council, so one statement that I'm hearing over and over is VHPA founded HSC or helped to found HSC. That's incorrect. VHPA supported the founding of HSC. Two different concepts. If VHPA founded HSC, it implies that VHPA came forward and said, hey, we want to start a youth wing called in the student council. To my understanding, that's not what happened. My understanding is that students at universities, just like what we're doing here, decided, hey, we'd like to celebrate our culture. There's nothing on our campus which lets us do that. So let's just start a group. And as far as where do these linkages come in, it's a very tricky issue. You gave the Hitler example. Imagine there's somebody whose father or mother or grandfather is actively involved in VHPA, but that person is a student at university. Just because their parents are supporters of VHPA, does that necessarily make them VHPA? Does that tie them to VHPA somehow? You see what I'm saying? Like where do these links begin, where do they end, and what do they show? You know? And so if there are some students who had that linkage that through their family or friends or whatever, there was some association with VHPA, does that necessarily make the whole organization linked with VHPA? And all of us have links with everybody all over the world, so how do you define what's there and what's not? Interestingly, 1993 is when HSC became administratively separate. So in that regard, that its own body of administration kind of came forward from 1993. In that regard, it's separated from VHPA.
My other question has to do with this, I don't know it's an accusation, but this idea that HSC was at a Sanghayo event or something.
Yeah, I was going to get that before we got the questions. That was going to
another parallel claim that VHP attendees were at an HSC event. So I'm curious about if those things are true and why is it that HSC is having VHP people at their event and vice versa?
That's B.
Okay. So that was already read. HSC claimed that in 1995, of December 1995, HSC was an invited participant in the Vishwa Sangh Shibir, Global Sangh Training Camp. All of its delegates, according to the press release, were from various Sangh organizations, and the Hindu Student Council was mentioned there. I wasn't part of HSC at that time. We're talking about 12 years ago. What I can say is that in speaking to the national level representatives, national level officers, in fact, Hindu Student Council or people who were part of Hindu Student Council back then can guarantee and verify that Hindu Student Council was not an active organizer or actively involved in setting up this event. It's quite likely and possible, and if it's mentioned here, then certainly people who were involved in Hindu Student Council were invited to that event, and some of them did show. But again, somebody attending an event doesn't necessarily mean the whole organization endorses it. So we're all part of this organization. If somebody goes and one of the officers goes and attends a meeting of, violent militant socialists or something, we have in fact at Berkeley the Berkeley Socialist Association or something like that. Just because of that association, you cannot, taint that person's character. In the same manner, I can tell you that this wasn't an event that the Student Council actively coordinated or organized, but that it's quite likely, some people were somehow involved. As far as the second one, you said VHPA members attended Hindu Student Council event. I don't know, is that event mentioned in that report or something?
I think it is.
Okay.
And there's also, I think on the letter that somebody from HSC sent out from the national headquarters, there was a very, very long PDF that had a list of events at a 2003 event. And on that list of presenters was someone from the VHP of America, I think, and someone from some other group as well.
So this is an excellent point. I'm glad to bring it up, which is, and I have looked at the Campaign Suffocating Hate report. I haven't read every single page, but I've read through much of it and skimmed through other parts that I couldn't read in detail. But one thing that becomes evident, which is mentioned in Rishi's email earlier, is that there are many instances where it's pointed out that speakers of RSS events, there's people involved somehow with HSS or RSS or BHP or BHPA, somehow were invited or were speaker at in the Student Council event. I can say two things on that based on my experience. So I've been to 4 national camps, New Jersey, Texas, recently in North Carolina. I've been to Florida. These are all HSC events. And I have never heard a speaker who is from a Sangha organization be there. I think in recent years that's never happened. Maybe perhaps back in the early 90s or something that was somewhat more common, I can't comment. But I should say that it, and this is something that, I find that takes, and you mentioned, for example, commenting on the character of people ad hominem attacks are distasteful. I totally agree. I also think it's distasteful to take things out of context, right? And to selectively pick and choose, and I think Somik said this in an email to somebody, that you cannot do research with whatever you want. You cannot do research with something already in mind. This is the answer I'm going to arrive at. And to me, it seemed that a lot of this report was kind of oriented in that manner. For example, you pick out certain specific speakers who come to events at some random times and say, oh, these are all Sangha speakers, so you're Sangha affiliated. But you fail to look at all the hundreds of speakers who've come all over the country to HSC events who represent various things. In fact, arguably, a very anti-Sangha speaker, Professor Michael Witzel from Harvard University, he was one of the very first speakers of an HSC event back in 1992. And over the years, you can see, this is mentioned in the rebuttal, that there are dozens upon dozens upon dozens of speakers from all categories, all faiths, all traditions, all cultures, Christians, Muslims, all sorts of people who attend HSC events and speakers at HSC events. So it begs the question, why do you only select certain speakers in compiling this report? Why do you take certain events, and that too potentially out of context? Why do you, and this is a question that I've had, which is, why do you release a report before having a civil discussion? See, how hard is it? I'm not asking anybody, I'm just posing a hypothetical question. How hard is it to approach if you have a disagreement, if I have a disagreement with Somik, doesn't it make sense I should contact someone and say, Somik, you know what, I don't know why you're saying this, or I heard something about it that you did, but could you clarify what this is all about? Like we're having here, a civil debate. And I don't understand why the National Student Council executives or whoever were not approached in this manner, but rather that a lengthy report with all sorts of information was compiled, then sent to 81 chapters all over the country. Then letters were sent encouraging professors at universities to encourage them to, write against Hindu student council. Imagine if you're a Stanford University student or you're a board officer, imagine if you're one of the officers here, and a professor suddenly approaches you and says, "Oh, I hear you have ties with BHPA." What are you going to say? It's like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's like libelous. You have ruined my reputation, and I have nothing to do with BHPA. And certainly, I know in my time at Berkeley, I had no concept of National HSC until I went to an HSC camp. And in all the time I've been affiliated with the national body, I've never once ever had any discussion about any ideology or anything relating to this subject, except when this report came out. And it begs the question, well, why is this report released in this manner and sent out kind of to this email forum? And finally, why is it sent out, why is it released the day of the Virginia Tech unfortunate incident there? And why is it followed up with all of these? And all of these questions, interestingly, are posted on a website. And it's being asked, well, these are questions we've asked the HSC National. But why are the questions posted on the website and not directly emailed or called or asked to the people who could respond?
These are very good points.
I don't know. I mean, these are. I'm not saying that CSFH is doing anything bad. These are just questions that have come to my mind as I am kind of following the story. And I see myself as a follower. In this story, I don't see myself as somebody actively involved in the debate, because to me it doesn't seem that there is a debate.
I must add on that point that I've interacted with both sides, and I find that both are really young people and very civil people. I've talked to them individually, but I personally haven't gone where either side has talked to each other. But having said that, I spoke to somebody on the CSFH side, and they were very excited that we were doing this. So I'm willing to bet that it's just that it hasn't happened. That's what it is, instead of some planned or massive operation. So I would really think that it's not a sinister plan that two sides have to make. This is like the beginning. We have to really believe the best.
I agree, but you have to wonder, why would an organization go to so much trouble to prepare a 70, 80, 100-page report, do all this research, come up with all this information, when it would have been so easy to have a civil debate? That's
and also release it in a particular day.
I think HSC National, there were a lot of other really good speakers there, but my question is why those speakers, why are there some RSS speakers coming to such an event, especially with, I think HSC must be an apolitical group too, so why are there these speakers there? Even if it's one, the question becomes is still especially in 2003, which is, 10 years after the movie association, why would there still be any remnant of something? Why would that person need to be there? And I guess maybe let's just sort of all the benefit. I'm just kind of curious to try to understand how that came to be or why people would show up.
Well, he's just ahead of me. I was going to ask you the next
Okay, I'm glad you asked that. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend Global Dharma Conference. I was really looking forward to it, but it didn't work out for me. And it's an excellent question. I don't know how the planning committee came up with the choice of speakers, and what criterion went into that. What I do know is that there were dozens upon dozens of speakers who attended that event, and I'm sure you've seen it even on your campus that you invite a speaker to talk about some topic, but you don't necessarily judge them on what their other interests are. And it's like saying. And I'm not trying to speak and say, well, all the speakers who were invited were excellent choices. I don't know who all the speakers were. I know that there were some, potentially controversial.
So for instance,
speakers.
I think what he might be referring to is that the head of, the ideal of RSS visited some campus and
who was
picture Ram Madhav.
Okay.
It's
I don't know, which speaker were you referring to?
At this conference, the president of the HBA actually spoke, so I can't imagine he came and spoke outside this context as being the president of the HBA,
Do you know what his name was?
Yeah, it's on the email from
Ashok Singhal actually.
He's an Ashok Singhal he said VHPA. Ashok said that it's VHPA, right? So that wasn't an expression, like look up.
Yeah. So I just remember in the email that HSC email, it says like it had a list of all the speakers and list of their affiliations. And one of them was like the president of VHPA. So I was just like,
So I had a question, like does VHPA have any links with VHP? Because from what Kiran
Yeah,
says, is like
I think that's another big question. What is the connection between VHPA and VHP?
You got me on that one.
I'm
not involved with it, but I can't comment.
Yeah.
See, okay, let's focus on this. I think the main question here is, I think it's coming down to, it's like, here, I'm hearing, okay, now I'm the moderator. I'm hearing, I mean, it's like your word against mine, as in, here's this, what I've heard so far is that it's innocuous, we didn't know, and we're as surprised as you are. And now, the question is, and I think this goes back to his belief question, so let me just pose that to the people who are here. Does belief come from experience, or does experience come from belief?
I'm not sure you're asking.
I'm asking a simple question. Does belief come from experience, or does experience come from belief?
Depending on the person and
Well, what about you?
There are two questions, right? Like how should it happen versus how it actually happens. So
Well, it's
like,
more like you have beliefs. No, I think this is key. I'll get to it in a bit.
or it may come from scripture also.
Well, why don't you just speak to yourself previous with it? So you said they were horrible, nasty backbiters. I'm glad this report came out because it really shows us the importance of this. So in terms of really creating an apolitical thing and making it very clear that there are certain things we just don't want to get into, because once you get into it, it's a slippery slope. I mean, word by word, I've been reading. Comes, asks the same question, how are the people in your village? And the old man, repeats the same question, how were they in your previous one? And he says they were wonderful, kind, gentle, loving. And he says, you will find that the people here are no different. And so the operative is not that they are so, but you will find. And if you have your beliefs, you will find experiences that confirm your belief. So at what level are we falling into that trap versus, it is really so? And is there any easy way to really get at this answer? I think this is an individual question and not something we can even figure out as a group. But I think this needs to be posed.
I think one good thing will be sometime maybe in future to get those people who wrote these things.
I wish, that's a real shame that we're totally not doing justice to the other side, because, the only thing is I've just read the report and I'm trying to represent them, but I really can't because they have all the history. I really don't have the history that they have gone through.
So one thing while you were speaking, and just to answer the gentleman's question there, is the Student Council is publicly and always has been, since 1993 for sure, a non-sectarian and non-denominational organization, which means people come from all sort of different backgrounds, all sort of beliefs, whether they are calling themselves Hindu or not. In fact, many of the officers and many of the chapter, not many, but several chapters all over the country are non-Indian, are non-Hindu by background. They're African American people, they're Native American people, Latina people, etc., who are involved in Hindu Student Council in different capacities. I think that might be part of the reason why different speakers are considered for these sort of national events. Global Dharma Conference was something that was not only national but international because there were several organizations that put it together. I believe in the report it's mentioned that VHP, RSS, a bunch of other groups actively coordinated that. That's not true. Only youth organizations were involved in putting together, and all of the youth organizations, they span the gamut, all sort of different things, but there were no Sangha organizations involved in coordinating Global Dharma Conference. The speakers, kind of reflecting on that whole idea of variety and diversity. Yes, that's one speaker you pointed out. I don't know the name of it. Have you found the name of the person who